Sofia, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm incredibly excited to have you sharing your journey, not only at Chime, but before. Welcome to Portrait.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I would like to start maybe with your personal journey, because you've been at different companies, different roles. You've been an incredible finance leader that has led a lot of changes, especially at Chime today. Love to know maybe the 2, 3 ways in which your role has evolved recently, especially probably with AI right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So I actually, if I had to simplify, I think the role of finance hasn't actually changed in the business. What success looks like is always been the same. You really want finance to be a value creator to the business and a strategic thought partner, influencing decisions and where the company should go. The challenge we've always had in the past to get to the strategic side, you really had to do a lot of work and many steps preceding to be able to actually get there. So I think the way to describe it is the role is changing in how much time we're spending actually being strategic thought partners to the business versus aggregating data, reconciling, really getting to those initial steps in the process. And I do think that has changed quite a bit. The bar has changed for a finance professional to really focus most of their time on being a strategic thought partner and deeply integrated in the business. So I would say that's the first area of change that I have seen throughout over the last few years, especially. The second one is speed. In the past, I think we've always looked at, finance has always been more of like a documentarian looking at historical performance, describing how something has occurred over the past month. What I'm finding more and more over the past few years, we are describing information in real time. There's a lot more speed, and we're really looking around corners every single day to be able to reallocate spend, make informed decisions, help our business change course where needed in real time. And so I would say it's more live updates throughout the month versus just looking backwards. And then the third is the talent we're bringing in. I think the talent profile has also changed. We used to bring in a lot of people that knew how to use specific tools and Excel experts. And now when we're hiring, what we're really looking for are people that are just general athletes, that are curious, that can deal with ambiguity, that can step into those strategic roles and really use data and systems to empower them to be even more strategic. So I think the bar has changed where everybody now on the finance team has to be more strategic. It has to really build that muscle.
I cannot agree more with you. I think yeah, we see the same at Pigment. The talent bar has completely changed. And I love how you described how finance has to transform itself and how now you are all enabled to be a lot more strategic. And that's, I think, fantastic for everybody working in finance
That's right.
to be able to focus on that. I believe a massive transformation at Chime. And I know you've been leading the way. We love working with your team on that transformation. Would love you perhaps to walk us through that transformation. Like, what was the moment where you saw something was not right, and how did you manage to, bring your team alongside the full transformation you were trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There wasn't really just one moment where all of a sudden we saw something wasn't right.
Yeah.
As I stepped into Chime, I joined Chime when they were about 700 million in revenue. Over the last 4 years that I've been here, we've grown to 2.4 billion, so 4x
Huge.
in revenue. We've really had to transform not just how fast we're growing, but our profitability. We had to get integrated with the business to help them make the best decisions. And so when we looked at the amount of time we were spending on controllership functions coming in, what I saw with the team was that we were spending the majority of our time just controllership functions, really spending time closing the books, doing the reforecast. By the time we finished the reforecast, it would be the end of the month. We would describe what happened to our executive team, and then we would start the process all over again. And so the team really didn't have time to step back and think about what is around corners. How do I really think more broadly? How do I spend the time with the business to really help them decide where to invest, where to make those trade-offs? And so what we ended up doing, just coming in, I saw that the team was working weekends, nights. So it wasn't a lack of effort. Everybody was working really hard and going above and beyond. But what we weren't doing was really driving that value that we needed to drive. So looking at what I started to do as a leader on the team was really inspect all of our processes. We went very deep. We started to think about what would it take for us to actually transform how we operate. And it started with our month-end close process and our forecasting process. Forecasting, the way it worked at Chime, we had 7 different models where people had to, go in, finish their part, then they would pass the baton on to someone else, to the next person. The other person would go in, finish their part. And that's how the process worked. Obviously, very prone to error, took a lot of time, many manual spreadsheets. And the other thing that I was very surprised by, but just the amount of manual inputs. We actually had, about a full week of work where people would go into different dashboards, pull in actuals, key those actuals into the models, and then that's when they would start to do their reforecast and the work. So just the amount of process and steps in the process that required manual intervention. We had key person dependencies on the team. And so it just wasn't sustainable, especially as we were getting ready to be a public company. I wanted to change all of that. So the first thing we did, I set very challenging goals and stretch goals for my team. We set a goal that we would have a reforecast process initially that was, we went from 2 weeks to 2 days. And then the ultimate goal was to get to half a day forecasting as a public company, because we need to be able to close the books, react very quickly, reforecast, and then spend the majority of our month actually spending time with the business and doing strategic work. And so that was the goalpost that we had. But in order to get there, there were many steps in the process. We had to think about systems. What we had were disparate systems. We started out with a pretty antiquated tool that wasn't really working for us as a system. And we started to think about, well, what systems do we need to allow us to collaborate, to get out of these spreadsheets, to get out of these manual inputs. We started to work with our data engineering team on the data foundation. So we actually invested a lot of time being intentional about data and the data infrastructure we needed to build, and then using systems to pull that data infrastructure in. We actually obviously adopted Pigment. And I think what was interesting about Pigment, we started to create this collaboration where everything became transparent. We had, people knew exactly where the data came from. It was all defined. It was all standardized. And all they really needed to do was build the models that would then ingest the data, and we could all do it at the same time. So that was the first change, was the really redefining our forecast process that was taking us a long time. The second, I would say, was just scenario planning and scenario analysis. Coming from companies like Amazon and Salesforce, I was used to doing scenarios within minutes and seconds. And all of a sudden coming to Chime to turn a scenario around would take us 3 to 4 days, which I had never seen. Obviously, you can't move fast enough if you're trying to ask questions like, what if I do this? What if I change the pricing? What if I launch a new geography? What if, we launch this product? What's the impact on our P&L today? But also, what does it look like 2 to 3 years from now? And so that was interesting to help the team understand that as finance leaders, we really have to look at range of outcomes. And so Pigment really allowed us to look at scenarios in a way that was dynamic. It was immediate. We went from days to seconds. And that's exactly what we have to be able to do. So that's just part of the transformation. But really, it's also stepping back and saying, what are the things we're going to do to allow the business to move faster? And where do we really need to invest our time? What are those products we're going to launch? How do we help them actually make decisions to grow faster? What are the frameworks that allow them to get unlocked without needing to come to finance? So it's really empowering and being an unlock to the business versus having them wait and come to us for every decision.
I love that. I would love perhaps if you could walk us through how you actually get alignment from the business to get there, because I think that's very interesting, because you achieve so much. It's in a very short amount of time you really manage to completely switch these large processes. So wondering perhaps first, what is your framework to decide how to prioritize this project? And second, how do you align the entire team and make sure that they follow you here?
Yeah, I think with the business, we started out at Chime having a lot of different priorities.
Yes.
We really pulled back to say which priorities are the most important. How do we do less and actually accomplish more? So that was the first thing that we did just as a company. And then on the finance side, what we started to do is define what success looked like. So if we were launching a product, we started to have conversations such as, do we want this product to be profitable from a contribution profit perspective? Do we want it to be more of an indirect profitability, meaning it's driving engagement or it's driving additional users? So we started to define what success looked like for each area. And as finance, we ended up just spending time with the business to help them look at the data with us. We started to model out different outcomes with them, bring them along. They became part of the process versus us telling them how to run their side of the business. We just really spent time and collaborated with them and became integrated in their decisions. And so I think that's been one of the success factors for us as a finance team, is just being an extension of the business and understanding the context, understanding what they're going through, allowing them to experiment. And that gained a lot of trust with the business. And once we were able to have that trust, we could then bring different ideas to them. I also think just helping them understand the impact of their decisions has been a huge unlock for us as well as a finance team. We weren't just saying you should do X because finance thinks you should do X. It was more, if you do this, here is the outcome, and here is how this is going to translate, and the context around why we are holding you to a certain guardrail became important. So we started to really think about frameworks, educating the business and bringing those forward and having them be part of the process and collaboration. I also think the data element, just having them just really start to share data transparently, insights transparently, that's where, I think the data a lot of times is objective and speaks for itself. And we've gotten a lot of just buy-in with that as well.
Well, congratulations. Honestly, what you've done is really impressive. I don't know if you realize, but first managing to really shrink that time to value in all the processes, like really, really fast is hard, but managing to align everybody and get that momentum across the business is really impressive. So
yeah,
congratulations.
and bringing the team along has been interesting too. The team wanted to spend more of their time doing value-added work. I think everybody wanted to do that. The question was, well, how do we find time? And
Yes.
the way we allocated time, one of the things I have found that has actually worked for us, we ended up allocating at least a week a month on what we called infrastructure week. And that infrastructure week is our protected time to do actual work, to improve our processes, to create frameworks, to do things, actual work, where we are not trying to take a lot of meetings. So we set expectations with the business and said, we're not going to be able to participate in all the meetings this week because we're working on infrastructure. And I think that really also allowed us to have the space and the time to move fast and to bring the entire team along. Because a lot of times you get pushback from teams where they're saying, I know you want me to do this, but I'm too busy. I don't have the capacity. The business is moving so fast. We're in a dynamic environment. And so I think for us, it's really been as a team making that decision and making that priority to carve out time to work on important processes. And as soon as people started to see the impact those processes were having, they were bought in. I didn't have to bring anyone in. We also really started to think about what it would take to be a public company. To be a public company, it's almost like, all the lights are on and everything becomes visible. And so you have to be able to operate with efficiency, but also with accuracy. And so to be able to get there, it's not just an overnight success. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of planning and execution. And the team wanted to make sure that we could deliver that. So this was not an overnight process, but certainly took us some time and a lot of buy-in across the entire team.
I would love to elaborate on that, actually. Going public with Chime, you started to describe the fact that you needed extremely fast reforecast. I would love also to hear what were the must-have investments and the infrastructure you needed to create to go public. As I know many of our customers are asking themselves the question, I think it would be great to hear your journey there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, going public, we really, again, coming back to the data and systems was probably the first thing. We needed to get intentional about how we were going to get our work done and how we would scale. So that was the first thing. The second, we had to improve accuracy of all of our forecasting. We had to really be able to explain the narrative and have the story. We had to understand what was the outside in view of Chime as well.
Mhm.
So we had to spend time really looking outside in at how, investors and how analysts would actually look at Chime. How would they, look at our unit economics? How would they go deeper to understand our growth story? So really where we needed to spend the time was on the storytelling and the insights. And then all of the systems and data and our processes had to just get more efficient and more accurate. And we really measured ourselves. We gave ourselves with Pigment 6 months from start to finish. And we ended up, what that meant was all of our models, everybody had to learn Pigment in that 6 months window, which was a very fast turnaround. But we wanted to make sure we got that system in before we went public. And I can't imagine how we would have been able to operate without a system like Pigment where everybody could collaborate. If you think about going public, you do a lot of different versions of your analyst model. There's a ton of iterations, inputs are always changing. And so to be able to do that quickly, but also accurately, you really need to be able to have the right foundation in place. So for us, it was truly, it was a scorecard. We held ourselves accountable. We measured our accuracy. We actually set really challenging goals for ourselves. So it wasn't just the cycle time of our work and our processes had to improve, but also the accuracy had to improve. We held ourselves to 90 to 99% accuracy. And we started to really put people against, these really important areas of the business. So the way we staffed the team was also really critical. For example, we didn't have a lot of people holding the business accountable on, budgeting. And we had to build out a team that was sitting with the business that really helped them understand how they could stay disciplined and provide transparency and insights into just even the foundational areas of their spend. We had to think about our product roadmaps and velocity. And so we had to partner very closely with the product team and our growth team. So there was a lot of work where we said, how do we switch the focus from being controllers and really become insightful partners to the business? And we really said we'd like to be at 80% strategic work and 20% more of this day-to-day foundational work. And then just having a scorecard and holding ourselves accountable to key metrics and key goals. So that's how we ended up getting there. But it certainly was a lot of preparation and really operating like a public company before we were public.
That's awesome. And I'm wondering, so today it seems that you are in such a great shape. Are there still a couple of processes that you are still trying to improve here? What, if so, what are there? Like, I would love to hear, perhaps, like as a public company, how you feel now about everything you've accomplished.
I feel like we're really reaping the benefits
That's great.
of all the work that we've done.
Yes.
It's actually been incredible to see, the intuition we had up front was exactly the right intuition. The discipline we put into place is now paying off in a huge way. We're seeing that with how we're able to beat and raise every single quarter, which we know
Wow,
is
that's
important, extremely important. It's not just about, the amount of you beat and raise, it's the quality of it. And so being able to be very strategic about our framework and our guardrails there is really been critical for us as a team. So we're reaping the benefits. I think we're definitely spending time, as I said earlier, being more thoughtful, spending time with the business, orienting ourselves around key priorities versus managing our processes. But what we're trying to do right now is really figure out how do we transform our processes completely. So it was all about efficiency initially, about accuracy. So we've done the foundational work. Now what we're trying to do as a public company is really take that step function change. It's all about what's the next step? How do we change how we work? And this is where we've leaned in heavily into AI as a team. We've built out a team actually within finance. It's called our finance transformation team. And that includes not just our systems and data, but it is truly, we're trying to think about how do we scale AI and what can AI do for us, not just at the edges, but in a much more transformational way. And right now as a team, that's where we are. Every team is working on a vision doc that incorporates AI. We're thinking about how we incorporate AI into our goals. We're doing a lot of best practice sharing. We're playing around with the tools. We're calling it AI tourism, which I really
That's
love this
great.
word because there's so much out there now. But how do you make sure that it's scalable? How does it tie to our SOX controls? As a public company, the bar is very, very high. And so we're really trying to make sure it's not just, AI at all costs and it's a buzzword at Chime, but we're truly thoughtful in designing, a set of tools that we're going to use to make us more efficient, but also allow us to continue to elevate as a finance team.
So you've done this incredible, best-in-class, world-class transformation to go public, and now AI, to your point. So that's going to be another massive transformation, as you started to describe. Can you perhaps explain to us? I know you're super forward-looking, and your team is experimenting a lot, as you just mentioned. So what are you doing today? What are the type of projects you are looking at? How is your team experimenting with AI? It would be great to get through some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to use AI in all of our key processes. And it's everything from, again, forecasting, but it's also the foundational pieces as well. I'll give you one example that I have seen has been really impactful for us. As a company, we work with a lot of different vendors, just like many other companies, and invoices that we get from those vendors all come in different shapes. For example, our Visa invoice has millions of lines of data. It always looks a little bit different. It's not in a format that's easy to ingest. It's hard to see if we're being overcharged in certain places, if we've opted into some fee that we didn't expect. It's hard to really see the trends and be insightful. So just one example is we've taken all of our invoices and we've used AI to now ingest them into a tool, and we're able to see what are the trends. It's highlighting for us places where we're actually not optimized. We're then able to use those invoices for all of our modeling. So now it's moving into Pigment. It's going through our models, and we're able to move within minutes to be able to turn something around and really look at insights. And then most of the time at that point is spent on, well, why did this happen? What was the driver of this? Is it driven by volume? Is it driven by rate? And we're able to just ask the right questions to then really find a way to improve our process. So that's just one example, which is like some of it is foundational. Other areas where we're starting to use AI is we're starting to work with our accounting team very closely and find a path to be able to shorten our close cycle. Just best in class public companies, they're able to close the books within 4 days. How do we get to 4 days? It's been a question, and we're really trying to move very quickly. So it's a collaboration on the accounting side with the finance team. At other areas, it's becoming, for example, our Q&A and investor relations, really preparing for earnings, looking at, our scripts and some of our insights and looking at competitor information and building narratives very quickly and doing a lot of kind of, experimentation with what potentially an investor would ask us and how other peers have answered that question in their earnings. So we're doing a lot of prep, investor relations prep with AI right now and continuing to spend more time thinking through that. Our monthly business reviews is the other area. In the past, again, we used to spend a lot of time aggregating the slides, writing the commentary. Right now, what we're doing is using AI to help us at least start the commentary, and then we're refining it. So it's truly trying to incorporate in every area of our day-to-day process. What I'd love to be able to do is actually use AI to be more insightful. And right now we're looking across the team to say, what are those processes where we can just completely eliminate the day-to-day work, the manual work. One area we just brought up as a team is intra-month pacing. We do this intra-month pacing process where we want to know after the forecast is done, how are we doing and how are we pacing? And in the past, what we've done is we've really relied on our machine learning teams to be able to do that for us. The challenge is we haven't always seen a ton of accuracy, and we're actually trying to see how do we use AI to get more accurate. How do we make sure that nobody's, looking at any number manually? It just aggregates for us. And daily, we actually have an intra-month pacing process so we know where we are and we can dynamically reallocate our resources, sound alarm bells where needed, work with our executive team to make better decisions and more insightful decisions in the moment. So it allows us to look around corners way faster than we would have in the past.
They're great. And by the way, just for you to know, we have launched a closed management app using AI actually at Pigment.
Oh,
So I
amazing.
think we should
Okay.
we should
We should
look
spend
at
some time
yeah,
together.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great to see how many the number of projects you're working on and how strategic they are too. Like how much value you are already finding on some very strategic projects. The question that is top of mind for everybody after that is how do you bring along your team? First of all, as we said at the beginning, it's probably you need to bring different talents in the team, but you also need to bring people within your team with you in that project. And there are things they are going to do differently. There are some part of their work that is now going to be automated and they have to be more strategic. So what do you do internally to train them and help them go through that?
Yeah, I think for us right now, what we're doing is every team meeting, we have a weekly
Yeah.
team meeting. We're sharing best practices
Yes.
almost every week. We're celebrating successes when people are developing something that is transforming how we work. And I think that has really created a lot of excitement on the team. I've actually not seen any pushback. The team has been really excited to use the tools. The challenge is there's so many tools out there. And so what we're doing is we actually have an onsite coming up in the next few weeks, and we're creating an AI day for us as a team. We'll have a few companies on site like Anthropic and OpenAI and Notion. And, what we're trying to really do is have them show us what's possible, how they're using AI in finance. And I think the idea is to inspire the team to understand what is actually out there, what's available, so we can start to really learn from others. So I think that's been one area that I'm focused on. And then the other piece too, it's really understanding not just we know that AI is exciting, everybody's excited to use it, but it's not there. It's very important to build it the right way. There's the governance around AI. And so what we're trying to do is also think about how do we build this in a way that truly, there's governance. We're documenting our processes. If somebody leaves the team tomorrow, someone else can pick it up. There aren't those key person dependencies. So we're also really focused on the right way to build it. It's not just experimentation. But what we're doing is, I think the first step is letting people use the tools, see the benefit of those tools. I'm excited to use, I'm using the tools in my day to day. It's been incredible. And just even leading by example, all my leaders on the team are leading by example. And that's been, I think, so important too, because then that tone disseminates to the rest of the team. I also think it's having very specific discussions around how we're going to use AI, which is why everyone is writing this. Every one of my directs has a vision doc that we're
That's right.
writing with how we're going to incorporate AI into our goals and how we're going to use it. And then how are we going to evaluate ROI with the business? So it's trying to really think through just not just our part in it, but what does this really mean for our business partners and how will we be having those conversations with them? So I think that's, as a team, that's where we're spending time pulling back and thinking about all of the implications.
Wow, I think this idea of the vision doc is really something I want to replicate now internally as well. It's a great way to make sure that everybody thinks really ahead there. You talked a lot about the experimentation you're doing with your team with AI. I would love to hear also from you as a leader. You just said that you lead by example. How are you personally keeping up, and what does your own learning look like to really understand what's happening today?
I just think this is so exciting.
Yeah.
I have seen, for example, look, I'm using all the tools. Like we're spending a lot of time with Claude. We're using Gemini and Notebook LM. We're really excited about, what OpenAI has, the ChatGPT functionality and how to use that. We're using Glean internally. So I'm just really playing around with a lot of these tools and starting to use them for my own day-to-day work and my own processes. And every time I've used something new, I just can see the benefits. And I am really excited because I've never seen this type of innovation happen so quickly and how that enhances your work as a finance professional. So anytime I've seen great examples, I'm sharing that with the team. And internally, we're just trying to use it. So for me personally, how I keep up, I get in there and I roll up my sleeves and I get excited to use the tools. So that's the first thing. And I'm also learning from my team. Like, for example, my team is doing a lot of work with Cursor, and it's been really fascinating to see what Cursor can do. And so we've had them in for a lunch and learn, and we're trying to learn, how those tools are working and how different they are from other tools. And so I'm just learning from my team every single day. And it's very much just trying and experimenting and diving in. I think that's where I've started to do. I know the tools are changing every single day.
Indeed.
So we're all going to have to keep up and move faster. But based on what we have, I'm really just, across the team, we're learning from one another.
And what about unlearning then? Are there things that you had to unlearn, or maybe things you were doing earlier in your career that now, are not really longer relevant?
I think, yes. Look, we're all, in general, I think speed, as I talked about
Yeah.
earlier, is becoming so much more important in our decision making. We have to move fast as a team, and there's so much ambiguity around us. And so, what I've had to unlearn in the past, I think we've all spent a lot of time in finance doing a lot of analysis
Yes.
and proving things out and taking time to make sure something was right. What I've had to unlearn over the past few years, especially taking this company public, is really over analyzing and, having all of the information at my fingertips. I think we have to have sometimes just good enough data and good enough information to be able to make the best decision. And it's about, lately, really over the past few years, it's about a range of outcomes. It's not necessarily a number. So I've had to unlearn over analyzing and having all the data at my fingertips and building a model for everything.
And if you are thinking about how your team would describe you now today as a finance leader, what do you think they would say?
I think they would say that I really am focused on outcomes. I think they would say I'm focused on impact. They would say I hold them to a very high bar and I set very challenging goals for the team. But, initially it can seem very difficult, but they come along and they've seen the benefits of setting those really challenging stretch goals. So I think they would describe me as somebody who has a very high bar and setting challenging goals. But I also, at the end of the day, I want the team to love the work that they do. And that's really important to me as a finance leader. I want my team to come to work and I want them to thrive. And if they're doing grunt work every day as a finance team, your job becomes very unexciting over time and there's a lot of burnout. And so I think a lot about the health of the team and how do we do the work that adds value and influences the business, but also lets people really thrive in their roles and develop in their careers.
So if you had to, obviously you described how you're learning, what you've learned, who you think you are the finance leader. So now if you had to give advice to somebody that want to be like you, like in the top 1% of the best finance leaders in the world, what would you tell them to focus on? What would be the things they should be doing?
I would say just, dive in and spend a lot of time with the business, understand the context, understand how finance can empower the business and what your role is in that. I would say that is the first element. I would say think about how do we build processes that are efficient, but also truly create that strategic thought partnership day to day. Like really think about what your role is as a finance leader and try to be very open and direct and share what you've learned. Bring people along as you're learning things. And I think that's where, the best finance leaders I've worked with are those that are really integrated day to day with the business. They're not just sitting in an ivory tower in finance and doing their work in isolation. They're really connected. They're really thinking about the impact their work is having and how to just break things and get creative. I think there's a lot of creativity in finance. A lot of people don't think about finance as creative, but I think the best finance leaders are creative and they truly, they kind of really challenge themselves to think differently and to think put themselves in the shoes of their business partners. So that's the advice I would give.
I like it. The word creativity is a rare one to use, and I think it's really bold and it's a really great one because it's true that, especially I think with AI today, you need to be extremely creative about the way to rethink your processes. So probably more important than ever. Sofia, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for being such a great customer partner to us, co-building the solution with us, such a great advocate. It was such a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot. So cannot thank you enough for being with us today.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for having me. It's been great. And thanks, Pigment has been a great partner to us as well.
Thank you. Thank you.